This episode is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your Raspberry Pi with our all-in-one arcade kit using genuine Sanwa arcade parts. And OneClickPrint.com for your photos on canvas, acrylic, gifts and more. Local craftsmen and global delivery. I love collecting and storing video games on my shelf as much as the next person, but there is more to video game preservation than just dusting off an old game box. Having the ability to actually experience old software is arguably the most important facet of computer game preservation, and our guest today heads up a team of dedicated coders, engineers and enthusiasts behind ScummVM, software designed to allow us to preserve the experience of and enjoy classic adventure games in the modern day. Please welcome to the cave, Eugene Sandulenko. Welcome, Eugene.
Yeah, hi. Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too, sir. Can you please kick us off by explaining just what ScummVM is for anyone who might not know?
Yeah, sure. So ScummVM is a program which is intended to run certain adventures and since recently RPGs. So what we basically do, we take an executable of a game, then dissect it, disassemble it, understand how it works from inside, and then rewrite in a portable C++. So at some point it was running on more than 30 platforms. Why at some point? Because platforms are dying. So we still have those ports, but they are not very popular. So then what you do, you take game assets, you replace executable with ScummVM, and then it runs same or very often better than the original.
Mm-hmm. We'll come on to some of those enhancements a little bit later. But if we go back to when the project began originally, we'll just touch on that to begin with, because you weren't there at the very beginning, were you? It was a collaboration between a chap called Ludwig, correct me if I'm wrong, is it Strigius, I believe. Ludwig Strigius and Vincent Ham. So they found that they were working on a similar goal and they combined their efforts. When did you personally arrive on the scene as part of the ScummVM project?
Yeah, so the project started in 2001, you were correct, and this is when Ludwig, he wanted to run Monkey Island on Linux, I believe, and it was on DOS, it was not working, so he started to reverse engineer that. And in parallel, independently of him, Yazar Vincent Ham, he started to do the very similar job for Monkey Island, for the first one. And once Lude published his first initial findings in form of ScummVM 0.1 or something like this, Yazar quickly found him and they joined the effort. It is how ScummVM was born. I personally joined a year and a half later in 2003. And why I joined and how I did, I purchased a game off the shelf, Full Throttle, LucasArts. And at the time I was running FreeBSD, which is one of the Unix-like operating systems. And I wanted to run it. At that time, DOSBox was in a very rudimentary state, was not able to run at full speed. So I was Googling and I quickly found out that there is this project which supports this game. But it was a localized version of it. It was in Russian. So once I launched it, it immediately crashed. So, but I'm a software developer. Why it crashed? So I started to look into it, and I found out that what happened is that the localizers, the team who created this localization, they changed a little the format for the font, but the original executable was forgiven for those changes, while ScummVM was expecting it in a certain format, so it crashed. I fixed that. It was like maybe 20 minutes. I submitted my patch and continued to play the game. I think that's it.
Because the ScummVM project is open source, so you were able to just pick out the code, have a look, and then resubmit your changes without a problem.
Exactly. But then about like 20% in the game, there is this bike fight scenes, and then there was a big pop-up. It was telling, "Oh, this part is not implemented."
Okay.
And you're supposed to get the tramp out of it, and this is trampoline. So this is what we are giving you. Continue the game. But I wanted to have the full experience, and I joined the IRC project, IRC channel for the project. And I was talking about, hey, I would like to do it. And you know what? Team members, they told, oh, good luck. And I was not even thinking, why is that? Because I could tell you the subsystem which I had to reverse engineer, it was originally called Insane. It is something about animation, something. And actually, it took me 3 months every night, over 12,000 lines of code. It's insane, really, piece of code. But once I started and was already deep into it, then I realized the size of it, and I decided not to stop. So this is how it started for me, and then continued. Then later in 2004, I became one of the project co-leaders. At the time, there were 3 of us. One started to be defunct, but with Max, we were co-leading like for 5 years or more. I don't remember exactly how much.
Mm-hmm. So you what brought you into it then was the game Full Throttle that you mentioned there. Did you still enjoy the game after 3 months of coding to get that working? Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent.
And it was, yeah.
So if I were to ask you which was your favorite classic adventure game of all time, would you be able to answer that?
Yes, I used to have 3 goals which I liked a lot, and they were achieved at this moment. One of them is the Neighborhood.
Oh yes, that's the claymation style one. Very
exactly.
Nice. Yeah.
Second one is very obscure game, and I spent a couple of years reverse engineering it. It's called Full Playable. It's come from one of the Russian animators, but it has no speech. And it's like, the logo, one of the logos of the game is the glass of vodka, which is situated on top of marijuana leaves. Okay. So this is about it. Because when you look at it, if you go to YouTube, it's like a super trippy. But the game itself is brilliant. Really, I highly recommend it. And a third goal, and I was thinking that we would never do it because there was many attempts of tackle it, but it's so huge. Blade Runner.
Oh yes, and that's from what I've read, that's been a huge project for you to undertake. Yeah. I would like to come back to Blade Runner a little bit later, but just sticking to the fundamentals of ScummVM. It's reached adulthood now, 2001, so it's 18 years old now, a little bit older. And it was originally focused on those LucasArts games. So you've already mentioned that it progressed to other engines. How did that evolution happen? What did we move on to next?
A lot of people, they have this concept. Of course, it also comes from the name ScummVM, because Scum is originally the script creation utility for Maniac Mansion. This is the name. I mentioned to you that in 2001, the project was incepted. But in 2002, very soon, we had another engine added to the game, which was for the Simon the Sorcerer. It was added by Lude himself also. So it was right away, I believe it was ScummVM version 0.2.
Okay, so very early on in its life.
Super early, right. And then we started to, next engines which were added were from the Revolution Software, British company. It was Beneath a Steel Sky, and then later, how it's called? I forgot.
Broken Sword or Lure of the Temptress.
Lure of the Temptress.
We had the pleasure just last week of speaking to Tony Warner of Revolution Software here on the show, and he said that they made Beneath the Steel Sky and Lure of the Temptress open source and worked with your team to allow ScummVM to make it work well. That all sounds very amicable. So yeah, sorry, carry on. So you did Revolution Software's games, and then where did you
Yeah.
progress from there next?
And this is where I joined about this time the project. One of the next big engines which I added to this, and it came like I didn't do it by myself. One of my also beloved games is Goblins. There is Goblin series, and just one day I opened my mailbox, and there was an email from somebody. I don't know who is that, and that somebody was telling about for his friend. It was not even direct, and he thought, my friend, he spent last summer of reverse engineering Goblins. Here is the working engine for you. Use it. And this is how we started. And Dr. McCoy, it's a Nick, and Sven Hesse, he started and he added and enhanced it to all the Goblins 1, 2, 3, and other games like even Urban Runner, which is 16-bit engine, which was I believe it was the first 16-bit game, like full high color, the Palette, then 256, and then 16-bit. And then goes true color. So it was the first game, and even at that time, ScummVM couldn't run it, so we had to recode videos for 256 colors. It was a big subsystem for that. We decommissioned it since that because now ScummVM supports true color and high color.
Excellent. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, Revolution Software opening the software up to help you. Is it common for you to get access to these games, the source code of these games, or are you sort of semi-blind, having to reverse engineer most of the games and the engines?
I was some time ago counting that at least at some point in time, about 1/3 of engines, and we have over 70 at this moment, came from the original source code. It was coming from several sources, but primarily from the sometimes they were coming from original developers, like it was with Revolution Software, or like it was with Adventure Soft later, or as it was with Joe Pierce and his Inherit the Earth and Labyrinth games. Labyrinth of Time. This is the full name of the game. But sometimes, a number of times, it's come from the IP right owners. So, some companies go bankrupt, and then later another companies acquire assets, and they would like to put the game, let's say, on GOG, Good Old Games. And this is where they approach us and they, hey guys, here is the source code, very often under NDA. For instance, it was the case with Tony engine. It was the case with what else?
I don't
remember.
I know Blade Runner is packaged up on Good Old Games. So is that a similar situation?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
We released the game, we reverse engineered it fully, and then out of blue, Good Old Games. Well, we have collaborations for a while. They using us, but they just came us and they said, "Hey guys, we secured the rights. We would like to use ScummVM as with many other games. Would you like to help us with check our packaging? Give us your feedback." How it is before we go and put it online. So this is how it was. And later we even provided them with better scans for the original documentation. So they updated it, and this is how it was. Because as we know, source code for the Blade Runner was lost forever. So the only implementation which we have is ScummVM, but since it is based on reverse engineering, it's just like one-to-one with bug fixes, and now with some of the enhancements as well.
Because I understand that in reverse engineering Blade Runner, you found certain things which weren't implemented in the game or weren't triggered, so you were able to add some extra things. Yeah,
there were dialogues, scenes, animations, which were sitting in the game assets, but they were not called from the game scripts. And it was just like logically where it makes sense. It is all the, how to say, guesswork, not based on anything. Also, I believe that couple of the original developers or directors were since that contacting us, and they provided some additional insights of it, but it was just how to say, unofficial.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the beauty of ScummVM is that it's this virtual machine that can run on lots and lots of different platforms. I know I've used it on everything from, I think I used it on Windows CE once a long time ago, used it on Windows on my netbook, used it on my tablet. It's just wonderful to use it on these devices, especially the tablet. I find the tablet, it really works with a lot of these point and click adventure games. It's a really good way of playing it. What are some of the other enhancements and things that have come from ScummVM now with these older games? You've got things like graphical enhancements and filters, don't you?
Yes, those are coming for free, like to every engine which we support, because they are built in. Then what we do, for instance, for some engines, it is possible to use, like we can switch easily. We have emulators of the sounds cards, and it is possible to switch sometimes like unorthodox combinations if there is a data. Like for instance, sometimes they, let's say, release a version of the game for Amiga, but it still has DOS soundtrack, so you can switch those. Of course, we do bug fixing. One of the primarily thing which goes straight away, enhancing or increasing number of save games, and then goes tons of bug fixes for engines, fixes for the scripts, especially for the Sierra games. They are basically infested with bugs, and you know that there were many re-releases. We support all of them, and we apply fixes like even to the worst one to make it the best or better. And sometimes we also very often, for instance, we have our own enhanced save format. So besides just the textual description, there is always screenshot associated with it. And another portion of our enhancement is translation effort. So number of games were translated by different translation groups. We developed tooling for that. At this moment, we are finishing translation into English of a Polish game which is called Galador, or Prince and the Beggar. It's called this. Xarze in Torch. Super recent tendency is to add subtitles for Blade Runner, one of those, and even more recent, which sits now in development 3, not yet released, text-to-speech support, since we have this enhanced added during the last Google Summer of Code. Now we started to do, and the work is done beautifully, so people just turn it in, and it's there. So then you can have narrative for all the in-game text for many games.
Yeah, so you can turn those old text-only games into talky point-and-click adventure games. Fantastic. So in creating all of these engines, have you run into any resistance or legal issues as part of the process?
Yes, we did. And it was especially at the beginning of the project. We had two times of severe cease and desist action from LucasArts. Because they were thinking that we are pirating their games. But from the very beginning of the project, and it was causing a lot of misunderstanding from many users, especially in the past, they claim that there is this abandonware, so-called, but legally there is no such concept. Copyrights last Mickey Mouse law is 85 years. So it is not possible to claim that this is abandoned. So it is not legal to download it from somewhere. So go to eBay, buy it. But these days it's much easier. Good old games, then and a couple of others, and Steam. So this is why when the lawyers of LucasArts were sending us those cease and desist letters, they even tried to proceed with it, but we did nothing wrong. And after our simple questions, and also at the second time we had lawyers involved, they had no proofs, and they just we leave you alone.
Right. So they thought
Yes.
they could try to scare you at first. Yeah.
But what happened since that? It's like marvelous, and we would never even imagine this, because since Disney acquired LucasArts, they started to publish on Steam games with ScummVM bundled.
Okay.
So we see that they acknowledged it. And the second source is that maybe you're aware, but Ron Gilbert, at some point he departed from LucasArts, and he established his own company, Humongous Entertainment, for children's games. That went Infogrames, then Atari, then finally bankrupt. And at this moment, their intellectual property is split between 3 companies. But all 3 companies are collaborating with us, except one, sorry. So all the games for the educational games like Putt-Putt, Freddy Fish, they went to one party. Then all backyard sports games went to another party. And Moonbase Commander went the third one. And the gentlemen which are running Freddy Fish, Putt-Putt, Pajama Sam, they started to collaborate with us the very first time, from the very beginning. And I have game assets from that and original source code. Basically, it's inherited from LucasArts. Same thing, and it is also came to us thanks to good old games, because I noticed that Moonbase Commander, they put it on sale. And since we have relationship with them, I asked, hey, is it possible for us to just to talk to the IP right owners? They connected us, and these guys, they provided us an NDA, full source and game assets, very interesting stuff, very unfortunately NDA, but we are working on it, and we are working on network support, so maybe sometimes in the future we'll be there. Unfortunately, I have no context for the guys from the backyard sports, and a few of the titles, those titles are not supported because they have still not disassembled big chunks of complex code with floating point, very, very complex stuff. So maybe if somebody will see your podcast and will try to do it, we will do this work out of love. They can then put it into for sale, because then it will be working on modern software, on modern operating system, Windows, Linux, whenever they want.
So are there any titles in particular from that sports game section?
Yes.
Which ones would you like to get access to?
Backyard Soccer.
Backyard
it's
Soccer.
Not Backyard Soccer 2000. This is also, and Backyard Basketball. Those 3 games, they are not supported because others were they were supported. They have much less of this code.
Okay, right. If you're watching this and you have any connection whatsoever to those games, then please do get in touch. And these are sports games that you're mentioning. So this is drifting from the adventure game side of things. So what's the thinking behind that? Is it quite sort of free and open to add these new games to the engine, or is there a group that has to approve what gets put into the engine? How does it work?
Not really. So we were always about adventures for a long while, but there was one exception. If a particular engine, and engine which is used for many games, and many of them were pretty universal, and if on top of this engine there are built non-adventures, they were still accepted. For instance, for Sierra AGI, this is early one, there is fan-made Tetris.
Okay.
which is supported by ScummVM, because it's the same engine. There is the only effort for us to add this game was to provide the checksum for detecting it, and that's it. It works. And similar situation was this, but particularly for Legend of Kyrandia, for this engine, Eye of Beholder, this excellent RPG, was built on top of it. Then there was a couple of others. So at some point, and also we ran out of low-hanging fruits for adventure games, and this is why. And another reason, ScummVM dash miscellanea. This project was spawned, which supports non-adventures, and it can had RPGs, and it was run by some of the ScummVM team members. So at some point we decided, okay, let's allow, because it's so close. Many of those games, they have a very good plot by themselves. It's not just like an action game, very close by spirit to adventures, and this is why.
So with ScummVM, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to deal with then? Have there been any major hurdles that spring to mind in the project, specifically maybe thinking about the engines that you've had to deal with, or beyond that, also managing the team?
We had people issues always, since we are all volunteers, you cannot force people to do, and sometimes there is a tension because we mate with each other, some of us, but for the majority, and if you talk about the whole connections, the whole representation is just this, bright dots which go into words and symbols. This is it. And when you speak over this, you cannot. It is difficult to pass your body language, tone of voice, what you mean to say. So sometimes there is disagreements, tensions. We had several. I would say several waves of those, sometimes not very nice, as I would even call those as dramas. We survived those. Then, of course, technical difficulties. For instance, till this moment, it's about maybe 8 years or so, we have this engine, Last Express. It is at the about 95% being finished. Sits in the tree.
Is this the one with the really beautiful animation, The Last Express?
Exactly.
Yes, yeah.
Exactly. It works. The game is completable, but with major glitches here and there. But just the developer who was doing it, he lost interest, he left the project, and the engine sits in limbo. And this is like one of those challenges. We have a number of those half-baked engines. We at least try to keep track of those on our wiki. So if somebody would like to start an engine, first look there before maybe repeating it. It's better maybe to pick up somebody's work and finish, because very often it is associated with disassembled code, half disassembled. So you are not starting from the scratch. So those are. But the most painful, I would say, difficulties which we have at this moment, and maybe this is also my tapping into your podcast, if any of the Android or iOS developers is listening to it and they would like to join our quite successful open source project, effort is not going to be significant because the port do exist, but they rot. For instance, we have problems on running on Android 9, Android 10. We have problems, slight problems almost fixed on Android 7, but we have no person with a deep knowledge of the platform. Somebody with deep knowledge, I have sense maybe it is just a matter of a couple of weeks maybe a couple of weeks of work for somebody who knows this stuff. And similar situation with iOS. We don't have Porter for over 7 years at this moment. And we just going by inertia, and we had sometimes super easy to fix. I remember we had a couple of the external patches, like in iOS 7 or 8, iOS 8, they broke the keyboards API, so ScummVM stopped to work. So it was just one liner coming from a third party, just through our GitHub, but it came like 2 years later because we don't have a porter. So if we have it, if somebody hears it and they would like to come and help, please, it would be so great, especially for Android. People sometimes even angry on us. Hey, when 2.1 is going to be released? We don't know. We don't have this.
Yeah, right. Please do get in touch if you have iOS and Android experience, because as I mentioned earlier, playing these things on a tablet is my favorite way to use ScummVM. So I'd love it to be brought up to date. Absolutely. I've got a couple of questions from viewers here. The first one is from Tim. He says, I'll just read it outright. He says, I would like to know, how much work is it to keep the engine so flexible? ScummVM versions are on all sorts of platforms, and I wonder if there was always, if that was always the goal. For example, is performance an ongoing consideration to allow the engine to run on more limited hardware? So I guess he's asking, would you rather have an accurate recreation with sacrifices to speed on a more limited device, or are you always is speed more important? Where's the balance? Is it all about accuracy? Is it just about a usable experience? How does it work?
It's a very good question, but part of it implies that ScummVM is an emulator. It is not.
True, yes.
So speaking of the requirements for the hardware, ScummVM, some of the ports which ScummVM runs on, of course not all engines, are 33 megahertz.
Right, okay.
The one of the most limited ports, Nintendo double screen, with 2 megabytes of RAM, and it runs there. Of course, early games, because ScummVM is a replacement for the original engine, and many games were written with the mindset of the computing power of 80s, 90s. So they are relatively low in the resource requirements. And since we are, and so the answer, the first part, we always try to do the faithful recreation first time. Even sometimes when, for instance, we see that some critical bug, but this bug became already part of the, let's say, game experience, then we turn it into an option. So then you can have original or not. At some point, I kind of abandoned this work for a while, but about 10 years ago, I was even working on adding CGA and Hercules like rendering, so that because some of the people, they were playing those games on those old monitors, and then they can just faithfully have the same experience. Of course, they would probably, out of nostalgia, play for 5 minutes, just cry a little bit, and then switch to VGA. But this is, the purpose is there, and this is why we try to support all the kind of the sound cards, even PC speaker, while you can have MT32 with all of this glory of the music, etc. Still, in order to have this, we love the games, and we would like have as faithful recreation as possible. And so far, there was not a single game which was CPU hungry or something. It could be happen at the early stages of development, but that's a bug. Then go and fix it. So this is why it runs everywhere. The most impressive port, my personal evaluation of this is a port for Nintendo 64. Okay. So you can put ScummVM on cartridge and play full throttle. It's simple. It's like mind blowing.
Oh, fantastic. That was actually the next question from a viewer called Chris. He wanted to know what was the most impressive port. So there we go. Nintendo 64. Wow.
Yes. But one of the most nasty ports for us was the port for Palm OS.
Oh, okay.
The reason for that is the code limitation. It has the limitation for the segment code maximum 64 kilobytes. So in now the platform is long defunct, and we killed the support for it. We don't do it, but it was even requiring us sometimes to split our like the full throttle, which I already mentioned. I had to split it into smaller pieces because it didn't fit. So that was, and if you remember, it was 256 by 256 sometimes with 16 colors. Oh, scummvm run there, so yeah, pretty effective. I would like to refer to the brilliancy of the original architecture, which was laid by Lude and Yazer, because they created this thing which is called all system. It's a hardware abstraction level. So what is happening? So scummvm is then split into major, you can say, 3 parts. One of them is backends, which knows about specifics of a certain platform, and it is pretty simple. And then, as such, it takes maybe like 2 weeks of evenings to be ported to a new platform, completely new from the scratch. And then all the engines, they are based on the ecosystem, so they don't know about hardware at all. And then there is a middleware code like decoders for the videos, for audios, and then like simple arithmetic functions and everything, data structures. So then what does it mean? If you take scummvm, take a new platform, spend a couple of weeks, then you have a new port, and all the games are working automatically for yourself. And vice versa, when you dump into it another engine, it will work automatically on all the platforms. Of course, sometimes there are restrictions, because some platforms may have a small physical screen resolution, so you cannot run higher games, or some smaller device have only 8-bit per pixel colors. But that's, it when it's just limitation of your platform. So this is how it works.
So let's talk about the future of scummvm then. How do you see it moving forward? What additional titles might we see? Platforms supported?
One of the big projects which is ongoing at this moment, Paul is working on a Dream Master, his snake. He is working on interactive fiction, text-only adventures. And it's very big project. At this moment, it already grew to the biggest one. So this is a big project because what is happening within complete the cycle, coming from the very beginning, from the earliest adventures, and also we expect additional RPG like Ultima games are being worked on at this moment.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Have you had the source code for that and help from the likes of Richard Garriott and No.
But there are several open source projects which we are actually merging in, similarly to how we merged with Free SCI for Sierra SCI games a while ago.
Mm-hmm. Would that be the Exalt engine? Is that who you're working with, or a different one?
I believe Exalt will probably come later, but it's Nuvi, or how it's called. I don't know how to pronounce it.
That's a very nice one, actually, because I tried that recently, and it allows you to merge the speech from the FM Towns version of Ultima with the PC version and get a really nice joined up experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be nice to see as part of scummvm. Yeah.
Yes, so this is coming.
Excellent. And
for the platforms, well, the latest addition was Nintendo Switch, obviously unofficial, because Nintendo is there is a little problem also for the current IP rights owners, because they would like to release some of the titles on scummvm on Nintendo Switch, but they can't.
So to use it on a Switch, do you need to essentially kind of jailbreak the Switch? Do you to
Yes, you need to. So basically, people are seeking a way of putting it officially in the store, and they will not be able to do it with scummvm. But then you just you can do it on Switch now. You jailbreak, put scummvm there, put game data in play, and the release is there already downloadable.
So, I mean, you must have a really intimate knowledge of the various adventure game engines, all of their components within, whether it be the musical score system, the inventory system, or whatever it is from all of those engines. What are some of the most impressive things that you found in these engines?
Okay, there was a number of really beautiful marvels. For instance, Discworld engine, they're using so-called coroutines. So it creates basically virtual multi-threading for all the game scripts. And as a result, NPCs, non-playable characters, they live their own life completely in parallel. And it's amazing, like impressive subsystem which is there, like wow. But it's difficult to develop for. Then Wintermute, it's really nice and open platform. It was engine which was created, and many good modern titles were based on it. So was also really nice and very, very advanced, because you can do like alpha blending, all of this smoothness, whistle, bells and whistle, which is help you to create modern game with high resolution. Some of the games are like really big, like 16 by 12, 1600 by 1200. So this is what I would mention. And then, of course, in regards of music, everybody goes digital these days. So maybe it's not relevant, but if relevant, then of course MT32. When you're talking about MIDI, this comes there. And that's it.
In preparation for our chat, I picked out Rama, which is a game I've got on the shelf, which I haven't played yet. I don't know if it's any good, but I noticed that you support the engine, and I love the Rama book so much I had to pick it up one day. So I'm going to try that. One thing I didn't see on your list are the Dynamics games supported. Games like I've got Heart of China here. Are they supported?
No. The reason for that, because they are so-called hard-coded. So instead of creating a nice VM, all the scripts in like middle-level language like C or maybe Pascal, and they are very difficult and very time-consuming to disassemble for us. I think it will take like a couple of years per game.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you can't just do the one game and then have... I think there were 3 or 4 that used a similar engine, but from the sounds of it, they were probably coded individually.
Yes, so probably there is a small, like say, a core, a kernel for this, like with manipulating, but then all of the game logic with every would be just a piece of code which needs to be reversed.
Okay, so we're pretty much at the end now. How can anyone who's watching support the ScummVM project and find out more, Eugene?
The primary support, which would be super great for us, is development, of course. So if you know how to code, please do. Please join us. Even if you can do some little things that would be helpful. Another thing is that we have an effort in translations or writing documentation, which is sometimes behind, because again, we either do the coding or write documentation. You cannot do at the same time. So even if you are not a developer, you can join and you can help. Third part, which would be more challenging, but if in case you have access to the source codes of the games, or you know somebody who has it, that would be also helpful, because then we would, sometimes we were working on really horrible titles just because we had the source code. And some people do love those titles, like engine was terrible, super terrible, but it works much better than original now in ScummVM. So that would be the third one. And of course, I mean, if you... No, I would say that we need money. But anyway, PayPal button is always there. So if you feel grateful, you can do something like, because for instance, for even GitHub, we pay $25 every month. So that could also help sometimes.
Wonderful, wonderful. And what about for you, Eugene? Do you have any projects aside from ScummVM that you want to share with us, or does that take up most of your time?
No, it is just my work and this project, and then I didn't have energy for it. Oh, well, I used to, no, actually, I just don't have enough time, but like 3 years ago, I was very active in OpenStreetMap community. because I love the game. I was developing some tooling and I was mapping a lot by myself. So this is where I still have some code on GitHub.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Eugene, for your work, and to the ScummVM team, past, present, and future, in helping to keep those old classics alive. We really appreciate the work that you all do. And thank you very much for your time today, sir.
Thank you, and have a good day.
If you enjoy my content and would like to support The Cave while receiving a completely ad-free experience and access to releases 1 week before they go public, then visit patreon.com/retromancave and join the official Cave Dwellers. Thank you for your support.